So the dark type is an extremely interesting history. It was first introduced in Generation 2 along with Steel in order to nerf the overpowered psychic type at the time. It's arguably the type that has aged the best. In Generation 2, there were only 6 Dark-type Pokemon that were introduced, and the two most important ones were Tyranitar and Umbreon. Tyranitar was one of the prime offensive threats, and Umbreon was a great defensive Pokemon, usually good for stopping the setup sweepers of Generation 2, like Snorlax. Now, Umbreon would go to fall to the lower tiers, but Tyranitar would continue to be one of the best and most dominant Pokemon of all time. Back to Pursuit. Pursuit, before the physical special split, was a special move which would deal 40 base power unless the target was switching out, then it would double. This is good against any Pokemon, but it's especially good against Psychic and Ghost types, since they would be hit with the 160 power move. You don't need to necessarily even pack it, just the looming threat that you may be packing it is enough to play mind games with your opponent. Now, before I move on to more Dark-type Pokemon and moves, I just want to get some facts out of the way. The highest stat on the average fully evolved Dark-type Pokemon is 107.06. The average attack stat of every fully evolved Dark-type Pokemon is 530.84, which is slightly higher than the average base stat total of a fully evolved Pokemon of every type, which is of 526.81. The same can be said for the average speed stat, which is 84.54, and the Dark types has the average speed stat of 86.12. In general, the most successful Dark types in the OU tier tend to be more physically oriented, speedy attackers, even though they do have good stat options for both special and physical Dark types. And Dark types aren't even super common, as they have the 7th lowest amount of Pokemon of every evolutionary line. Now I want to explore the role in the type chart. Dark doesn't technically have the most impressive looking characteristics out there. There's not too many weaknesses and resistances or types it's super effective against. In fact, 3 of the types that it's weak against, Bug, Fairy, are all very common types. But having an advantage against ghost types is pretty great since historically it's been a very consistent type, and there's been no good lack of ghost type Pokemon all across the years. Psychic types, unfortunately, like I said, were once great but have been falling and falling off more. However, they are still relevant because Game Freak does consistently give Psychic types good moves and good abilities. Next, I want to talk about pretty much the most impressive attribute of the Dark type, which is its absolute goated roster of moves. Now, I'm only going to focus on the moves that have been historically great, not signature moves introduced in very late gens. So the moves that I want to focus on are Knockoff, Sucker Punch, Pursuit, and Taunt. Knockoff was initially a 20 base power move introduced in Gen 2. Obviously, people were choosing it because of the side effects. Knocking off someone's item is already good enough. However, in Generation 6, it was buffed to 65 base power with a 1.5 boost if the target is holding an item, which is insane because now you can actually use it as a bona fide damaging move, not just using it for the side effect. Surely nothing could make this move better. Well, in Generation 8, an item called Heavy Duty Boots was introduced. This item is controversial itself. It's popular on pretty much any Pokemon, but especially Stall Team, where it's not uncommon for 6 Pokemon to straight up be running boots, and since racking up hazard damage is one of the best ways to take care of stall teams because stall is inherently a reactive playstyle, so you'll be switching out a lot. Knockoff just became even more important. Sucker Punch is also one of the most consistent priority moves of all time. Since Pokemon is a game that inherently rewards smart predicts, Sucker Punch is a perfect fit for the game. But really the thing that makes it so good is its base power. 70 base power may not seem like a lot, but to counteract the fact that priority moves are inherently really valuable, priority moves are also usually pretty weak, which makes Sucker Punch very valuable. On top of that, Sucker Punch is very consistent because of its distribution, compared to, say, Extreme Speed, which has a higher base power, but very few Pokemon actually have it. And next is Taunt. Unless you're a banded Pokemon, every Pokemon benefits from non-damaging moves. Whether it's healing or boosting moves, if you manage to disturb a pivotal turn with Taunt, it can majorly throw off your opponent and even win you the game. And of course, if you're facing a stall team, Taunt is going to be the most useful tool in your arsenal. One of the reasons that Mega Sableye is one of the best stall mons of all time is because via Magic Bounce, it is unaffected by Taunt. Taunt is the kryptonite to most stall team. And obviously, because all of these moves are Dark type Pokemon are going to be the ones that have the most access to it, and so they are, again, inherently more valuable. Now, currently, 2 out of the 10 Pokemon with the highest usage rate are Dark types. But even outside of that, some of the most prominent sweepers are Dark types, like Meowscarada, Roaring Moon, or Darkrai, or even in the lower tiers like UU, where we see Tyranitar, Greninja, and Weavile. On top of that, Dark types are also immune to Prankster moves after the nerf of Gen 7. This makes physically offensive Dark type sweepers have the upper hand because besides them, the only other Pokemon that cannot be Will-O-Wisp are Fire types. Overall, Dark types age like wine, not only bringing important Pokemon to the table, but also has some of the most important meta-defining moves of all time. And given how Dark types are increasingly more powerful each gen, I see it cementing itself as one of the top types in competitive Pokemon.